Okay, now it's time to go with lecture number 2 here. And this lecture is basically based on the first thing that we actually did, whereas I sent you out a handout on my personality assessment of you. It turns out that actually I sent the exact same thing to all of you. It was a very general description of just how most people are with personality, and it was not anything specific to each one of you. But yet, when I asked you your ratings on it, the mean ratings for the class, for the 20-some people in the class, was about an 8 out of 10. You wrote down, oh, you pegged me on this one. That's exactly how I am. That's called the Barnum effect. And with astrology, you can basically tell people general stuff that really has no practical implications, and people generally go along with it and believe you. That is not considered a very high level of scientific evidence base. So the Barnum effect is a good illustration of that. Sorry for playing that game on you, but it came out kind of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I didn't read any personality profiles on any of you or make any assessments. You all got the same thing, and you all basically said, yep, you got me with this. So that's not very scientifically based. Evidence-based medicine or evidence-based ideas. One of the ideas is sometimes when people have information and opinions, they share that in articles. The question is that evidence-based? The Natural News article, as many of you pointed out, was a good example of an opinion-based, very low-level information on evidence-based. Case report. Sometimes people talk about one case or another case. That's also considered a very low level of evidence-based. Finally, research studies. When you run research studies, those are considered more high-level things. There are two types of research studies I'd like to talk about and have you add a little bit on. One is what we call single-arm research studies. Single arm. And so actually, I can add to that. I'll actually give you some links to some of my asthma studies. Single arm study is where you take people, what I did, and one of the studies I'll share with you, is I took people out of asthma and measured them before and after. That's a good way to assess things, independent and dependent variables there. Intervention was the asthma education program, 8 weeks long. The dependent variables were things like quality of life and depression. But an issue with a single arm study is if I started that study, let's say in August, and people were very low on quality of life and asthma symptoms, and then in November they were a lot better, I'd like to say that that was due to my program. But there would be potential confounds, because a confound is a variable that you cannot control. People generally have bad asthma in the month of August because of all the bad air quality. So a better way to do that is to have a randomized control study. And I'll send you a link on that one as well. In a randomized control study, what I would do with people is I would run the study from August to November with one group, but with another group, I'd measure them in August, do nothing for them for like 8-9 weeks, and then measure them in November, and I would often find that nothing would change for them. And that's a way of controlling for the time of year. So that would remove that confound. If that was published in a peer-reviewed journal, which it was, that would be considered a high level of information of evidence-based. The next level are considered clinical guidelines. Clinical guidelines are big documents, diabetes, arthritis, asthma, have them all out there, 400-page documents that really map into here is how you diagnose and assess things. It's based on expert testimony of people who know all the research in the field. The article that you had, the second one, was not clinical guidelines, but it was kind of close to that. Finally, we have what's called a Cochrane review. And in a Cochrane review, not only do they review everything, but they actually give critiques and things as well. And so in the critiques, they actually go into what was wrong with some of the research and what you would want to do to further it. So that's called a Cochrane review. The next thing I wanted to talk about, so write a good detailed outline of this. Excellent, good, basic, weak. Main criteria are the content and the writing style, grammar, and the structure. Hopefully you can do this in a pretty good fashion. Ethics in doing research. a lot of you pointed out that the Milgram study was a problem. So let me go through that with you. Maybe I'll actually start with the Milgram study and just include this in your outline at the start. The Milgram study was considered completely unethical, but not at the time it was done. The Milgram study, a lot of you talked about the fact that it's not fair to put participants in this situation. These participants thought they were shocking Mr. Wallace, but they were not. And now, because of the Milgram study, we found out something very important there. We found out that people would be willing to go, about 2/3 of the people went all the way to XXX, where they thought they were actually killing people. And that actually can explain something very important, like the Holocaust, of why people were just following orders here. But now that's considered unethical, and the Milgram study started what's called the Institutional Review Board. An institutional review board is a board that basically looks over the ethics that you want to have and make sure that it's safe for the participants. There has to be minimal risk. There cannot be really much in any way of deception, informed consent, where they have to sign something to say they will do the study. They have to be able to withdraw at any time, and they have to be debriefed, which is to share things about what was going on and told what the purpose of the study is. So with an institutional review board, the purpose is to protect the subjects, and there are basically 3 levels of this. There's exempt, expedited, and full board review. If there is more than minimal risk and there is some deception, the full board gets it. The board is composed of scientists, of academicians, of people from the community, church people, to really evaluate, are people being protected? Is there more than minimal risk? And the Milgram study would never pass now because it was much more than minimal risk. There was deception used. There was long-term harm. That's another thing you can add. These people who went through it thought they were killing people, and that's really harmful to them. They didn't get to sign any informed consent form, and they wanted to withdraw. They couldn't. They were, of course, debriefed after, and they learned a lot, but that wouldn't be considered ethical in this day and age. That would be full board review. My asthma study would be considered something that would be expedited. There is a risk to people, but it is really minimal risk. It's an 8-week education program, so there is a minimal risk that would go to the IRB, and 2 people would look it over and say, yes, this is administratively okay. And then exempt. Exempt is where it really has almost no impact whatsoever. If I was doing a study watching how many people used paper towels for washing their hands coming out of the bathroom, could stand in there and watch, and that would be an exempt study. So we have exempt, expedited, and full board review. I'll see if I can find something to link to that for MBC for you folks. So that'll conclude lecture number 2. Take good notes, write out a good outline, and see what you can do.